This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. Good morning, Kelly.
Morning, Ethan. How are you today?
Wonder how many times we've recorded this when I have a cold. What do you think the number is on that?
How many do we have?
Over 100? What are we, like 105?
So I'd say 99.
Dang.
Right around there.
Okay.
I'm not sure they're all colds.
A lot of it's
thinking
allergies.
Maybe allergies. And is the sinus infection, is that a cold or is it just a sinus infection?
I don't know. It's a good question. I do get those. Yeah, I definitely have sinus issues.
All I'm saying is I don't have the exact number, but it's a lot.
It's a lot. Maybe like 20% of the time. We'll ask AI.
You go with that number.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll start off with a couple articles here. So the first one is pretty interesting, and I think you sent me a video on this, Kelly, where in Mississippi they have a new law coming up. I think it's early July is when it goes into effect.
Mm-hmm.
Is where it allows minors to be charged as adults in violent crimes. Now, the person was reading off like all these things in the video, and it was like quite a few different like things that a minor would do with a weapon, with a gun, and they'd be tried as an adult, and like the penalties were like years in prison, weren't
significant.
It was a pretty significant number.
Yeah, so there
was like
adult
having
level punishments.
There was like just having it, bringing it onto school property. There was one around like shooting into a crowd, and like it, depending on effect that it had by shooting into a crowd, determine how many years in prison it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like all these different things, but like the penalties were quite, I'll say, severe.
Yeah, I hate when we start making laws that are, and I understand it, but I'm going to say this, and I know that it's going to sound weird, result driven.
Right.
And it's like in hockey, when you have a high sticking penalty is 2 minutes. But if they draw blood, it's 4 minutes. The same penalty. One just happened to get the face involved or the nose or whatever, right?
Okay.
And you almost see these guys punching themselves in the face to get a bloody nose. But to me, it's more the act. The shooting into a crowd is inherently dangerous. And whether or not the bullet strikes somebody is irrelevant to me. Right? Do you have enhancements if somebody dies? Yes, I get it. But it shouldn't solely be the results, right? I get it, but here's the deal. The fact that we are seeing an escalation in teen violence. We're seeing what they call teen takeovers, and there's a lot of press media attention to the coverage of that. But there are also a lot of those also end up in large fights and shots being fired and people dying. So this is likely a step to curb that kind of behavior. And the lady who pushed out the video believes that this is going to be a trend. And we talked about this before. There are certain crimes that me personally, that I believe should, regardless of your age, it should be considered an adult crime. And again, I get it, but there has to be consequences. And that's just my own personal belief, but I do see this as becoming a trend. They're going to start trying to lock down these teen takeovers. They're also trying to lock down the reckless behavior on these e-bikes and these e-scooters. Those are starting to get a lot of attention right now. So the bottom line is that parents need to step up and start being parents. I think you need to know where your kids are. You need to know what they're doing, and you need to have those discussions. They're not necessarily hard discussions, but sometimes you don't want to be the bad guy, but you have to be the parent, right? You can't just let them do whatever the hell they want to do, because there are consequences. And I believe that we're going to see not only a trend in laws that hold account the actual teens and children more accountable to things, but I think that's going to spill over to holding the parents accountable.
Yeah,
So
at the end of her video, she was like talking about like, oh, hey, parents, make sure that your kids know about this or something like that. It's like,
yeah,
shouldn't
but
shouldn't parents be discussing these kind of things with their kids anyways?
yeah, they should. But we've had a lot of,
Don't.
for lack of a lot of situations in which the consequences aren't there.
Yeah.
That should be. And I think we've let the pendulum swing too far one way, and now we need to bring it back into the middle somewhat, because it's impacting not just a few kids, it's impacting hundreds and thousands, if not tens of thousands of kids, because we have these kids that can't read coming out of schools. We have these kids that make poor decisions. We have these laws because people make poor decisions. So, and you can't just say, well, he's just a kid. He or she's just a kid. At some point, they have to start.
You're not just a kid if you're making adult decisions.
Yeah, that's correct. that's or you're taking adult actions, right?
Right.
These actions are meant to be handled by an adult, and you're making them. So suffer the consequences.
Like it's one thing if like you're a young teenager, let's say 16, and you get in a car accident and you accidentally kill somebody, like that's different. Like sure, you were driving too fast, but like
right.
I think there's quite a difference between that and like knowingly grabbing a weapon and like firing it at somebody. Like that takes a lot to do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
but when you drive a car, you're expected to act like an adult.
Well, I mean that's true. Yes.
So yeah. And they teach you that right away. You have decisions that need to be made, and these are tough adult-like decisions. That's why you have to be 16 in most states to learn how to drive, right? And it's because you're supposed to be mature enough to do that. But if you can't do that, you're going to have adult consequences potentially. So, and that's why we see more and more kids being prosecuted for manslaughter type stuff when they were driving and they were on the phone, because an adult would have been prosecuted for that. So I think there's going to be a trend there. I think it's probably well overdue. The unfortunate part is that we need to do it, because here's the bottom line. If parents won't parent their kids, somebody else will. And in this case, it's going to be the law. And there's no forgiveness there. Once you have a law that says if you do this, this, and this, you're going to be tried as an adult, there's no lessons learned there. You don't get to make that mistake. So you're going to start seeing more and more of that, because I think we've lived in a society without consequences for a long time, and when there are no consequences, they're hard to control. And I don't mean that in a negative sense.
Yeah. All right. And then this next one I want to talk about, this happened, a week and a half ago or something like that. Probably a lot of you guys have seen it. I think it made its way around pretty well. So this is an event where a young kid is getting on the bus, and it shows a driver going to the right of the bus at speed, but then applying their brakes, which caused they applied the brakes, I think, like in the grass, so like caused their car to like tail whip, tail slide, and it hits the student, and miraculously the student's like, I'll show the video. So watch this. I'll share the video.
Because I'm thinking that there's probably to drive to the right and be on the grass means they're trying to avoid the collision in the first place, to me.
Right. Yep. That's what everyone kind of concluded in all the comments. I'll just play it again so you can like crazy.
Yeah. So that looks like they were trying to avoid the collision in the first place.
Yeah. So that's why people think that the driver might have been on their phone and was like, oh shoot. The part I want to talk to you about is, so I want to get your take on this. Now that you've seen this video, the driver received a citation and a fine of $161. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, I don't know all of the circumstances. I don't know the location. I don't know the jurisdiction. So there's a bunch of things that come into play here. As we just talked about this, right? So when you're driving as an adult and you make poor decisions while you're driving, there's consequences to it. Different places, different locations handle this type of stuff differently. It might be perfectly in line with what that jurisdiction is doing. In places like California, I think here in Virginia, there's lots of push, lots of enforcement around hands-free devices. There's a lot of push, not so much right now, but throughout the school year, of cars that are violating the red flashing lights and the stop signs that are on the side of the buses. So there's a lot of push. So when you have that kind of enforcement, then it sounds a little bit like a citation that results in a $160 fine. I don't know what the injuries are, and I'm going to sort of counter
apparently
what I said earlier. Yeah, so sometimes the extent of the injuries plays a part here in these things. So if they're minor, or like a bruise or something like that, there's not much that's going to happen to them. But you could see how close this came to potentially being a fatal incident.
Yeah.
Same actions, and so, but I get it. But sometimes the result of the injury shouldn't be the driver. Like, of course, my experience comes from California. So you get a drunk driving as a misdemeanor. You get a drunk driving that causes an injury, that's a felony. If it causes death, that's a different crime, right? So but it doesn't say if you get a minor injury, you get this. If you get a intermediate injury or a large injury, you get this one. So yeah, it's treated so differently. I mean, even drunk driving nowadays, is treated differently in different jurisdictions. So California, what I'm familiar with, this would be a big deal. Probably more than $160 fine. Probably likely a suspension.
Yeah. All right. So here is your curveball there, Mr. Kelly.
Oh.
So I could say this the best way that I can. A school in Massachusetts now has a policy that carves out a specific religious exemption to its strict no weapons rule, allowing of a particular religion students to carry to carry a ceremonial knife known as a kirpan. I don't know how to pronounce that. On school grounds, while prohibiting knives, guns, replicas, and other weapons for every other student. So I was reading through this, and it says like the rule is that it has to be dull, whatever dull means, and that it has to be less than, I think, 3 inches long and basically concealed carry the whole time. Yeah, sheath secured and worn under clothing at all times. So it's not
silly rule.
So obviously the I saw this on Facebook, and the comment section was as what you thought it would be. Wow, what?
Yeah. So little double standard there, right?
That's all I gotta say to that is
we often
what?
Yeah. So yeah. At some point, you just got to say, what? Obviously, we're looking at the religious side of it, right? But that being said, almost I can remember, there has been this cry for the separation of church and state and not to have religion in the schools. Now, I'm not a religious person, so I generally don't get into this deal, except for when there's double standards, right? So
yeah.
Does that mean that we can start exercising our religious beliefs in our schools now? Because that's what you're doing here, allowing one religion to exercise their beliefs. And I will say this, when you choose to allow them to exercise their beliefs that involves a weapon, then that increases my, what are you doing face substantially. It just makes zero sense to me, because it's a dull. But if you look at or you try to think through the why dull. Well, you don't want anyone to cut themselves or anything like that. But probably 90% of the fatal wounds by a knife have nothing to do with the sharpness of the knife. They're stabbing. They're stabbing wounds. They're not slicing wounds.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, can you actually puncture into someone's body with a dull knife?
Yes. All you need is a point.
I really get the
Right.
really get the
What's
jab.
that? It's the point end. It's not. It doesn't need to be a sharp instrument. It just needs a point on it.
Wow.
And I mean,
And the way these knives are shaped, like this would like do some damage.
Yeah.
It's not just straight. It's got like this crazy curve to it and stuff to it. Like that would like open somebody up.
I get the religion, but that's if especially if you're going to hold fast that religion doesn't belong in schools, then you need to hold fast to all religions. You can't just say, oh, we're going to allow this religion, not this religion, right? And we're going to allow this religion to practice their stuff, but not the one that you want to. So there's potential for conflict there, right? When you start allowing these different religions that conflict with each other, then there's an increase in the potential for conflict.
Yeah.
Right. Because now we're having kids exercise their religious rights. Same with everything else with underdeveloped thought processes. Right. And so if you're going to do it, be consistent. And so I don't know of one, but there's the potential that some religion could say, you know what, this is part of my religion. What's that? I'm carrying a firearm.
Just make up some religion that allows you to carry a firearm.
There was back in, it's been in my lifetime where there was a lot of people. They ended up, most of them being cults. So late 60s, early 70s, there was this whole movement to create your own religion. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that. And because there's tax benefits, there's other incentives and so forth. So there was a lot of potential there. But if that's what you want to do here, people are going to start saying, I'm creating my own religion. And that means I can carry a firearm. And as soon as you open up that door, there's not much you can do there, right? Because we've talked about it. We talk about active shooter all the time. But we've also talked about active assailants.
Yeah,
and
there's way more probably way more knife attacks than gun attacks.
But they're not mass shootings, and they don't.
They're like,
and they don't fit the
one.
Yeah, they don't fit the anti-gun narrative. But the fact is there. If you have the inclination to commit violence on somebody, you're going to do it. Whether you might not get away with it, but you potentially could get away with it. You're going to find another methodology. A car. I tell you this. I know I've told you this over and over. The active shooter case that I was involved with had 14 people injured. They were split down the middle with firearms and some other means, right? So there were 6 fatally, not including the suspect, but there were 6 fatally wounded, 3 with firearms and 3 with a knife. And then we had the same number of, and I don't remember the totals, I think it was 4 and 4, that was injured with firearms and 4 with other means, like being run over by a car. So there's 3 modalities here: firearms, knife, car. Same incident, but what do we know that as? We know it as an active shooter case. So it's, when you look at the potential, they're going to find a way, right? That's why it's important for us to understand, identify threats early, do all of the prevention steps, the threat assessments, the behavior interventions, those types of things. Now, I just think that it's one of those things that you open yourself up to all kinds of issues, right? You just, and what's to say?
I mean, it's like if you...
Who's validating it?
That's my question, is like, so you have this student come in that's, if they're wearing a clothing that's supposed to be covering this, it could be pretty obvious, right? So are they pulling them aside and like checking every one of these weapons to ensure that they're dull? But then like you're pulling out specific students of a specific religion and like checking them. Like, doesn't that pose some other like weird thing, like issue, where you're like, pulling out kids off to the side because they're of a specific religion. Like that's also kind of weird, right?
So here's my biggest problem.
But you have to.
I'm going to go out. Here's my
I don't
biggest
know.
problem.
It's just
here.
weird. I don't like it.
With all that's going on with mental health, school violence, school security and safety, and all of this, we had an entire process where somebody said, I want to, my religion requires or allows me to carry this weapon, this knife. And then we had an entire process where adults in an institution went through and thought through this and then came to the conclusion that it's okay.
Yeah.
And these are the conditions under which to do it. These are the facts. And you're sitting there going, that makes zero sense.
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me more than, well, then you're going to start pulling these kids out. Well, let's get to the foundation of what the root cause here, the root concern. And that is they went through this entire process when the school systems have been screaming for years, get religion out of our schools. And then all of a sudden we have this school district that says, you know what, time out. We're going to allow this group of people. And so then the question then comes up, well, what about these other groups? Are you going to single my kids out? How am I getting punished for carrying the knife that I received? It meets all of the standards that you have in place for your religious people. It meets all those physical standards, but it was given to me by my father as a rite of passage type,
Sure.
This is the knife that your grandfather gave me when I turned 14. Those, wholesome family traditions, right? It makes zero sense to me. It just is. The whole process and the fact that they had a process as opposed to saying, no, that's a knife. You can't have it.
Even in the article,
you want to sue me? Here, this is my name, and here, sue us. We're not going to do it.
Even in the article further down, it says that like the principal was saying like, oh, well, the students were already doing it before. So back in 2024, they were already doing it as part of their faith.
I was beating up kids on the way to school, but that makes no prior acts, prior bad behavior doesn't excuse future behavior.
Yeah, I don't know if they were saying because they were doing it before and nothing happened, so it's okay.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was the thinking behind that, but
that it's silly. That's what I'm most concerned about. Let's walk through that process and let's see how many things make no sense, right? And then you come to the conclusion that absolutely makes zero sense. I'm not bashing the religion at all. Like I said, I'm not a religious person. When you're talking about here's what this comes down to for me. I can make your school as safe as humanly possible. It's going to look like a prison. We're going to search everyone who comes through the door. We're going to scan them with scanners. We're going to do all of that stuff, right? But we know the prisons, all of the prisons, have the same issues inside these secured, quote, sterile environments that we have in the public. And it always boils down to you can put as many safeguards in there as you want, but it comes down to the failure of the people to do their job, right? And so if you're going to allow these weapons, and I don't know what the extent of how many kids or anything, but it doesn't matter. But if you're going to allow these weapons in, people are going to start saying, well, little Johnny has this because of religious beliefs, so I'm going to bring mine in, and somebody's going to miss it. And then they're going to start saying, well, I've been carrying this for 2 years and nobody's ever said anything before. Well, just because you didn't get caught or just because it was excused before doesn't mean it's okay now, because that's a failure in the process and a failure by the humans to adhere to the process. If you've been doing this for 2 years and you're just now codifying it, and you're saying, well, we haven't had any problems yet. Okay, we get back to your decision making and your after actions. Is this right? Or are we just lucky for the last 2 years that none of these kids have pulled a gun on or pulled a knife on somebody?
Yeah.
From a safety perspective, 0 cents.
Yep. I knew you were gonna like that one.
I mean, if somebody came to me as a safety director and said, "Hey, this is what we're thinking," I would say, "No, stop."
Just stop.
I might lose that battle, but I would go home knowing that I did everything I could to stop that, saying that I would stand up in front of the school board and say, "This is a silly policy. This is, you have to get this right." And just because there are no violent incidences today or in the past isn't a good predictor of the future, because we know that when weapons are introduced into a bad situation, that escalates the potential for violence. So we're not even going to talk about the bullying process, right? If we talk about the bullying process, what is bullying, right? Coming at somebody from a position of power. Do you think a knife gives somebody the position of power? Yes.
Yeah.
It does. Do you think the TSA is going to let this religious organization walk through with a knife saying, "Oh, it's religious"? No, they're going to say, "Put it in your little bag and check your bag," right? They don't say, "Oh, you get to carry this weapon through," right? I can't even carry a little box cutter for obvious reasons. I don't have any problems with it.
Right.
When I travel to conferences, I buy a lot of box cutters because we need to open packages and stuff. So I buy a box cutter. So
yeah, we're always opening up stuff.
It's
crazy.
What else we got?
I was going to talk about, we're 27 years past Columbine, and from a very outside perspective. So as some may know, I was homeschooled my entire life. So I have basically very little experience like in a school. And so from an outside perspective, and this is going to be interesting because we're here on a podcast, like trying to be like, leaders in the space. So I guess I question what it means to actually be a leader in this space, because from my perspective, you've got a lot of people out there that are claiming to be like school safety experts, but like if you really start asking them questions, they always point towards a very isolated, acute solution that only fits what they're promoting. And it's like
that's part of our
it's really obvious.
Part of the problem with our industry.
Well, so like the thing I question is like, okay, are you really here to solve the problem, or are you here just to make your podium taller? Because from an outside perspective, that's what I see. But am I alone in that, or I don't?
So
I'm not going to call out names, but there's quite a few.
But so that's the problem with our industry. We've talked about this a fair amount, in that our industry, many of the vendors within this space see something happen and they say, "Oh, we can solve that problem," and we have
but only that problem do that, right? Within that very specific
solve for
moment.
A single problem. Yep. And they don't look at the whole picture, right? So that's where we get into when are you trying to solve the problem or a problem? And the issue becomes pretty visible, readily identifiable when you look at some of the solutions that are out there. We have, what do you sell? Panic button. What do you sell? Cameras. What do you sell? Access control. What do you sell? Visitor management. What do you sell? Alerting. But so that's, I'll say this about Crisis Go. That's one of the things that we get right, is we look more at the whole problem, and where it's not one day it's going to be completely solved, because it is always evolving. But we're looking at the problem, and we consistently look at what are the gaps, and we try to figure out what's the best way for our company to fill those gaps, as opposed to saying, here, I'll solve this problem. And then we wait for somebody else to solve the other one. Oh, I'm going to buy that company, or I'm going to develop this thing because now there's a different problem. And so I will say that I think we do a pretty good job at doing that. But you're absolutely right. We get into these things where we're looking at things with a very narrow scope, a very narrow vision of what school safety is. And we try to please a bunch of people, and then we find out, oh, that didn't really work. I mean, in the shooting that I was involved in California, there were a couple of laws. We were the first. In fact, the red flags law and the I'm going to get the name of it wrong, but the restraining orders for people to seize their guns and possess guns because they pose a threat, right? I forget what it's called, but both of those laws were enacted as a result of this shooting. But the reality is if those laws had been enacted before our shooting, it would not have prevented our shooting. And so you have a bunch of people who are part of its politics, right? But we have a bunch of other people who are trying to capitalize. I got a solution for that. And they really don't understand the process. And, and they capitalize on simplicity versus actually trying to solve the problem. We're still in an era, 27 years past Columbine. We're still in trying to this place where we're trying to figure things out, and we're still a response-oriented industry because our first responders and our schools are not talking together like they should be, and they're all looking at how do I respond, and that's all they're looking at. What's the quickest way I can get here? I need to be here quick. Well, if you guys are talking together, if you guys are working together, and I mean actively working together, then you would be there before something happened. You would be training each other on threat identification, threat assessment, threat management. And when I say threat, I'm not talking just violence. I'm talking about the threat of fire, the threat of earthquake, the threat of tornadoes, the threat of lightning strikes. You're looking at all of these different threats. And sure, you're going to have meetings where certain hazards don't apply to you, but they may. Like you might say, a threat of a tornado doesn't impact law enforcement as much as the fire department and emergency medical services. You might say that until you're the one driving past the school that just got hit, right? Yep. Now it becomes your issue, right? You can't just keep driving past that school.
No.
So now would it be beneficial if you understood what the hazard potential is and where the kids are going to be, where the adults are going to be, how long the fire department is away from there, what the floor plan looks like, where the damage is, how to do a damage assessment to the building, how to do that properly, so that when you start I went from sunny to it is a deluge right now outside my house.
Nice.
But that you know how to properly do a damage assessment so that the fire department now know to understand that they need a technical rescue squad as opposed to just a fire truck with some medical equipment on it. So there's my take on that.
Yeah. I mean,
did I address your concerns?
So, I mean, I think it's, you've got people that, they're like, oh, you're doing it all wrong. You need to focus on response. And you're like, oh, well, what do you sell? Oh, well, I sell response tools. Hey, You need to focus on training. Training is the answer. What do you sell? Well, I do training. Okay, well, so it's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'd say for schools, be wary of anyone can call themselves an expert.
Yep.
I'll just say it that way.
Yeah, and I will tell you that there's a movement afoot to try to certify people, but I will tell you this: a certified school safety director. Let me take it outside of the school so I don't upset too many people, but I'm going to upset some people. Certification doesn't mean knowledge and experience. Certification is a minimum level achieved. And we have hundreds, I'm going to say tens of thousands of certified emergency managers who have never actually been involved in an emergency. And we're there because there's a mandate. But you can tell pretty quick who those people are, who have never actually responded and managed an incident. Is certification a step in the right direction? Yes. But we've talked about this before. Of course, 34 years in law enforcement. But when somebody says, oh, I've been in law enforcement for 20 years, this is where my experience comes from, it's not all the same.
No.
Not all law enforcement people are created equal. different jurisdictions have different exposures, and we had a meeting with a regional area, and in that area, we were trying to say, hey, look at this is how you guys communicate together, and this is how we can do it easier and better, and this is a good solution for that initial response and event management, incident management. And one of the high ranking law enforcement guys there says, why do we need that stuff? We have radios. And my response to our people when I heard that he said that is he's never responded to a large scale emergency, because one of the sites in Uvalde, there were like 300 and some odd officers there, with no pre-established chain of command, unified command, no predetermined communication channels. They were all working off of their own systems and so forth. Now, we can get into the interoperability thing, but that's just a small piece of it. It's a huge piece, but everyone, hammers on interoperability. But when you have interoperability and you have 300 people on the same radio frequency, it's chaos. You can't do that. And that's not to mention all of the fire guys and all of the rescue guys. It just bogs everything down. There's no command and control, right? And so it becomes an issue. But until you have experienced or you have knowledge in this whole problem, we're going to continue to push these simple solutions, and they're going to be response because everyone thinks that somebody else is going to be the person responsible for responding. This is their job, not mine. That's not the case. And until we get people, and I'm not saying, hey, I know Officer Jones, he's our SRO. I'm talking about people who can make decisions during a large-scale emergency and operationally make decisions on who's going to go where. That is not an SRO.
No.
I love the SROs, don't get me wrong, but they have to do that beforehand. And until we get that level of participation from all of the key stakeholders, we're going to still struggle. And we're still going to have people fall victim to, oh, wouldn't this be nice? Yes, it would be nice, but it doesn't solve the problem. And if you let knives into the building, that's not going to solve the problem.
No. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.